it is time for my Sweet 16. Part 2, my Week 1 Sweet 16. How does the AP poll do it? Did the AP poll put out its Week 1 top 25, or is this their Week 2 top 25? I'm going to pull this up. AP poll. So the AP poll is technically in week 2 when it releases. So this one is the Week 2 AP poll. I don't have it pulled up exactly because we're recording this before it comes out. A little peel back the curtain. So this is going to be the Week 2 Springblake Sweet 16. And this is my power rating system. It is not a resume ranking, and that is so important because you guys are going to get mad at me when I go through this list, and you'll say, well, hey, that team just beat that team, but you have that team still higher than that team. There's about 2 to 3 instances where that happened. This is not a resume ranking. I am trying to use the Springblake eyeball test and say if I put this team versus this team on a neutral field this Saturday, who do I think would be favored in the game? That is what I'm trying to do here. That's what a lot of people do in this sport now. They don't look at resumes. Resumes are cool. Go to the AP poll for your resume rankings. Go look at, at Joe Schmo on Twitter who's like, Florida State is now the number 1 team in the country because they beat Alabama. I'm sure a lot of people are going to put LSU up as the number 1 team in the country. They're still, technically not closer to 16 than to 1, but they're not my top 5. LSU had a really good win on Saturday. They're not in my top 5. I am taking a look at the teams collectively and saying, okay, if I put Team A versus Team B on a neutral field, here's how I think it would be favored. So, again, this is not, if you're someone that pays close attention to college football, this isn't foreign over the last few years. There's guys like Kelly Ford, who puts out his rankings and ratings, the SP Plus ratings. There's FPI that puts their stuff out where I saw Texas was still number 1. I'll call this, if you want it, my ball knower eyeball test. The ball knower eyeball test, or just my Sweet 16. These are my top 16 teams in the nation. We're going to go from 16 to 1. Not going to spend too much time on it. When I used it in the preseason, it was a full episode because I was like, I need to tell you what I think about these teams. We'll kind of just brush through a few things that stood out from Week 1. Maybe there was nothing that stood out and they just stay right where they were. But let's kick things off. For the first time in the Springblake Sweet 16, my 16th team, let's take that from the top. This might be a nice social clip, so let's kick her off there. My first team, my first new addition into the Springblake Sweet 16 poll is the USC Trojans. They were a team in the preseason I had floating just outside the top 16. They were in that 17 to 20 range. 600 total yards of offense last week. They won by 60 points. Yes, it was against Missouri State. I kind of liken USC to LSU, which we'll discuss just a little bit here, where, both of these teams really bad defensively in 2023. They make some awesome defensive coordinator hires in that offseason. In 2024, the LSU and USC defenses were definitely better than what they were before. And I think this year they're going to be some of the better groups, more improved groups that we see in the nation. So, yes, I'm putting USC in here after they looked really good against a really shitty team. But I think what I saw defensively from them, I can paint a picture here to where this might be Lincoln Riley's best team since arriving in Southern California. The Trojans at number 16. Another new addition up at number 15 to me is the Tennessee Volunteers, another team that was floating just outside as we geared into the season. The reason I had to wait for Tennessee, I needed to see the quarterback play to truly visualize what this offense was going to look like. I came away very impressed by Joey Aguilar. I thought the run game was huge versus Syracuse, and that was, it shouldn't be a concern because it's never been a concern under Josh Heupel. It's just people didn't know, okay, well, how is the line going to look? How are the new running backs going to look? Star Thomas and Deshaun Bishop combined for 174 yards on the ground. Joey had some really nice timing throws deep down the field. You can see this offense, a way for it to resemble what it looked like before Nico, where it was one of the more potent ones in the nation, where it wasn't so up and down. He was also pretty mobile in that game as well, too. Tennessee, definitely worthy of being a top 16 rated team in the nation. Moving along to number 14, I've got the Michigan Wolverine, who are up 2 spots from where they were in the preseason. I had them at 16. They're now at 14. This is, to me, a lot of the same parts that we've come to expect out of Michigan the last few seasons. It is, smash mouth football, really great defense, really good run game, and hopefully efficient play at the quarterback position despite not having lethal talent on the perimeter. And we're going to talk about Michigan more in the show because they play another top 16 team for me. We'll preview that game at the end of this show. They're still very empty at the wide receiver position. But they did have tight end Marlon Klein show out this past week, lead the team in, I believe, receptions, yards. I think he got a score. I can't remember. Really good tight end one for this team. A nice go-to safety valve for Bryce Underwood, who I thought looked really good in his first collegiate start at the age of 18. So Michigan definitely in the second tier of the Big Ten, but certainly a top 16 team in the nation, and hopefully they continue on with a really big game coming up Saturday. Number 13, another team up 2 spots for me, are the Miami Hurricane. One of the few teams that showed me the most in week 1. Carson Beck was great, as we just talked about. Trench play was awesome and really just leaned on what I believe to be a well-built Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team. Outside the one blown coverage, the secondary looked much improved. Corey Heatherman, an awesome addition there at defensive coordinator. Miami always scares me. This was one thing that we didn't talk about. Mario Cristobal in these tight games, you just are like, oh, fuck. Is he going to do it again? Is he going to do it again? Hopefully getting over that hump against Notre Dame and not doing it again will kind of put that in the past, but it's hard not to get a little bit tight when you think that Miami has had this big lead and all of a sudden it's tied. You're like, uh-oh, he's going to do it again. Still one of the best teams in the nation. My number 13 team in the country as we head toward week 2. Down 1 spot to number 12 are the Oklahoma Sooners. The only reason they're down is because I did have to leapfrog another team a few spots up. Mateer looked awesome against Illinois State, 400 passing yards, 4 total touchdowns. One thing that was really weird was their running game as a whole, but specifically Jaden Ott. He just got 1 carry in this game after being listed as the team's running back 3 on the depth chart. Jaden Ott was one of the prize additions of the transfer portal. At least he should have been. And so I don't know what the plan is there. He was a little banged up in fall camp, so maybe they're just trying to keep him fresh for week 2 against Michigan. Maybe they'll need him a little bit more in that game. Something that a number just pops out to you and you're like, I wonder what that means. We're going to keep our eyes on that. But overall, it was a good effort from the Sooners offense. My only concern with this team still comes down to their offensive line play. I thought it looked good against Illinois State, but that's Illinois State. They got Michigan coming up this week. There's a pretty big difference between the two. All that said, Oklahoma, my number 12 team in the country. We're going to have a little bit, how big of a run do we have on it? Okay, it's a little broken up, but we got a nice chunk of SEC teams coming up here. At my number 11 spot and down 2 slots from the preseason are the Texas A&M Aggies. People are a little tense about A&M. They did put away UTSA at the end. They didn't cover that game. I think it was 42-24 was the final score. I think that was the final. I still think UTSA is like just a really potent offense, even though they're a G5 team. I think they're a talented one at least. Passing offense for A&M, I don't think too highly of UTSA's defense, but like if this is what we're going to get, this is why I think Texas A&M is of top 12 caliber. Marcel Reed, 22 of 34 for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Mario Craver was the big addition from Mississippi State. He had 8 grabs for 122 yards, 2 touchdowns. Casey Concepcion, he was the prize addition at wide receiver coming from North Carolina State. 3 catches for 72 yards and a score. Also returned a punt for a touchdown. Really, really strong effort from the passing game there for A&M. A sign of hopefully good things to come as the season progresses. One thing I'll say about A&M, and I think this is the other reason that people might have been a little concerned, is that the run game wasn't really there. And that's interesting. I'm going to take a quick break here to talk to you guys about this. Notre Dame, best running game in the country potentially, at least the best running back in Jeremiah Love. They looked pretty rough. You have, who was the other team that I was just mentioning? A&M. I think that's one of the best duos in the nation running the football. They looked really weak. I could say the same about Texas. I could say the same. I guess Georgia's looked all right. There were just a few teams where I was like, oh yeah, the strength of your team is the run game. And then we got through week 1 and it was like, what happened to the run game? So that was a little concerning for A&M, but I don't know. Maybe they just didn't really give all too much of a plan there. I think maybe early in the season they wanted to get this passing game more comfortable against lesser opponents so that way they can figure out what they really have from that position group. A&M, long-winded way of saying still a top 12 team to me. They moved back a little bit, but my number 11 team in the country. So at 10, we have my second biggest faller of the week. That is the Clemson Tigers. And to make a drop like this, they moved down 6 spots. They were my number 4 team in the preseason. I talked about this in the recap show. I wanted Clemson to be something that I don't believe they are. And if we're just dating back to the beginning of last year, 0-4 against the SEC, I don't think of LSU as that same caliber of Georgia, as that same caliber of Texas that they faced in the playoffs last year. So that was kind of the one to me where I was like, maybe I'm just trying to force Clemson to be something they're not. Cade Klubnik has also been really bad against top competition, against the SEC. 0 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in those last 4 games. We spoke about that in the preseason. I think I looped in Notre Dame as well, too. His numbers drastically worse than when playing against the ACC, a conference not really known for that many great defenses. I still think they're a really good team. They'll be a college football playoff team. The reason for such a harsh reaction here, the eyeball test, I was confusing my brain and my eyes. My brain was telling me and my heart was telling me like, no, Clemson is that. Clemson is what you expect them to be, what everybody's telling you they are. I think they are a damned good football team, but there's a difference between being the best team in the ACC than to being a tier 2 team in the Big Ten or a tier 3 team in the SEC. That is where I see them more instead of being this is one of the top 5 teams in the nation. Again, I don't want to overreact, but we do have a year plus of information to take into account here. Clemson drops down 6 spots, still a top 10 team for me, and we'll see where things pick up for them through the rest of the regular season. Conveniently, right after Clemson at number 9, I've got the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, this is the official biggest slide. And this, again, you don't want to overreact in week 1. I just said that. Alabama's probably going to come out this upcoming week. Is it ULM or something? I forget who they have. They're probably going to look awesome, but I slide them down 7 spots. They were my number 2 rated team in the country heading into the season. The furthest drop. The reason being, in a predictive model thought process, in the offseason, I look at the coaching staff, of which I think is top 5 caliber in the country. I look at the roster and the talent on the roster. I believe it's still of top 3 talent in the country. But the mental makeup of both of these groups, the roster and the coaching staff, has to pull some weight here and drop this team down. And again, this isn't like Texas where it's one game of something that was different and like, oh, let's overreact to that. No, this is a year plus of effort. This is a 5-5 football team over the last 10 games. They have lost 4 games where they were double-digit favorites. For as talented as you are, you cannot lack mental effort, and that is why I bumped Alabama down to 9. Now, some people probably sit there and are saying 9 is still too high. I get it. I still think at the end of the day, they're going to be one of the better teams in the country. I think that the trench play will be much improved. We talked about the absence of Jam Miller, the top running back, who I thought was going to have an awesome season. He'll be back around that Georgia time frame at the end of September. They were also without Tim Keenan at defensive tackle, their best run stuffer. And that is 2 just really monumental losses on both sides of the football that can at least paint me some sort of excuse to why they look so bad in the trenches. Again, the effort is the reason that they lost this game, but I'm not going to overreact and push them out the top 16. I'm not going to put Florida State above them either. I think if you put these 2 teams on a field again, Alabama would still be favored, especially if it's on a neutral site. So that'll be the first one where I've mentioned, hey, this team beat that team, but you have that team higher still. Alabama would be favored on a neutral field if they had to play Florida State again this Saturday. It's just how the sport goes. But still, big adjustment here. Now, I still want to buy into them. I still believe they're a playoff caliber team when you think of talent and coaching. If the effort is not there, they will continue to slide and eventually fall out of this Sweet 16 rating. So I think up next I've got another team that was what? Are they my biggest risers? One of my biggest risers. I had 3 teams move up 4 spots, moving up to number 8 in the Week 2 Springblake Sweet 16 rating system are the LSU Tigers, another team, much like Miami, that just proved the most to me this past weekend, showing that you can win in a rock fight, showing that Nuss doesn't have to put up 40-plus points, but he can kind of just manage the game and pick the right moments to make big plays. Super impressive win for LSU. My one warning, I said this on Monday's show. This is the one, like I said, people are going to have LSU up as their number 1 team in the country. I have them here at 8. You're like, oh, well, why is that so different? I wonder if by week 8 we look at the outcome of this game totally different. If LSU is struggling in conference play and you're like, wow, what happened to their offensive line or what happened to their defensive line? Maybe they just went up against an ACC team. You know, Georgia went up against Clemson last year, and Clemson wasn't the same in the trenches as they were this year, but Georgia blew them apart in the trenches in that game. I'm just being patient with LSU, and I want to see, okay, against Florida, against Texas, how does your trench play line up with those teams? That's what I'm going to look forward to, and that will be when I can start to creep LSU closer to my top 5. For now, though, still moving them up 4 spots, my number 8 team in the nation. Just ahead of them, another team that moved up. They moved up 3 spots. This is one where it's like, I had to drop certain teams. You know, we dropped Clemson pretty big. We dropped Alabama pretty big. I got the Florida Gators as my number 7 team in the country. And this is tough because it's not like they did anything to show me why they needed to be 7. Like, yeah, they beat the crap out of Long Island University. I think the final score is like 56 or 55-0. DJ Lagway was great when he, was on the field. I think he played maybe a half, 15 of 18 for 120 yards, 3 touchdowns. They were smart to not use him in the run game, save him for this really tough stretch that they're about to go on. The craziest schedule in college football starts this Saturday for the Florida Gators. They've got a tough game against USF. I think Florida's going to win it. It's a tough game because USF is really well coached. They've got a really fun offense, and that is just the appetizer because after that, Florida has to go at LSU and then go at Miami. Oh, then they get a home game. Oh, wait, it's against Texas. Well, they have to stop after that, right? Like, that's murderer's row. No, after that, they go to A&M. USF, LSU, Miami, Texas, A&M. 4 teams that I have in my top 12. And then beyond that point, they get Mississippi State, but right after that, it's Georgia. Florida has it so tough this year, and I feel really bad because it's, like I said, it's my 7th rated team in the nation. This will be the team that sits in my top 10 throughout the season, even if they are a 500 football program, because I think the schedule is just that unfair. So if we're sitting here in October and Florida is 2-3 and you're like, well, why do you have them as your 9th best team? They lost to teams that were ahead of them, and I think they'd beat the teams that were behind them. So hopefully, we get some really fun games. Hopefully they can sneak out a couple of wins and prove why they deserve to be closer to, 4-3, but still right now, a damn good football team. The Florida Gators, my 7th rated team in the country. I got to get so used to saying rated instead of ranked. It's hard to do. Let's keep moving along here. My number 6 team in the nation. Another one that really didn't have to show me all too much this past week. They move up 2 spots from number 8. A lot of that has to do with teams flushing out, Alabama and Clemson moving down. I've got the Oregon Ducks as my number 6 rated team in the nation. Dante Moore looked great. Because, of course, he was going to in this Will Stein offense, 18 of 23, 213 yards, 3 scores. Again, didn't have to do much in week 1. They've got a couple of tune-ups here before we actually have to see them play real talent. But I know that this is a top 10 rated team in the nation. The funniest stat I think I saw all weekend, the funniest number where I was just like, oh, we're gonna put on the analytics department for this one. Not an advanced stat here by any means. It's just reading and counting. Oregon had 12 guys log a carry on Saturday. 12 guys register a carry. That is just like hilarious behavior by Dan Lanning. All in all, I didn't think they had to show too much. DeCorian Moore, the talented wide receiver, had some really nice plays. He wasn't super involved. I think they kind of took their foot off the gas when they realized, like, oh yeah, we don't actually really have to do anything. Was it Montana State, I believe? Anywho, Oregon, kind of in a situation like Florida here where they move up because Bama and Clemson slide, but it has nothing to do with what they showed me on Saturday. I knew they were going to beat the crap out of whoever they faced. So then we get into our top five. Now, my top five, I think, is where people are obviously going to have the most contention. And let's start. My number 5 team in the nation is still my number 5 team from the preseason. It's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It is just tough for me to move Notre Dame down at all after a close loss in a raucous environment when you had an 18-year-old making his first career start in college, and the style of game you play and the style of game you usually win by, you weren't able to do so. You were forced in a really tough position where it couldn't just be man football in the trenches. You had to throw the football a lot to keep pace with Miami. I don't leave that game saying Notre Dame is now not a top 5 team in the nation. I think they were put in a really tough position in this game. Obviously, when you look at Jeremiah Love's stats, and we talked about this in the recap part of this game, you're like, 10 for 33? Is he banged up? Were they saving him? It's something that you definitely want to watch. But I think the way this team responded in the fourth quarter, being able to tie things up after looking pretty lost most of the day, to me, proved all the fight in the Fighting Irish. And yes, you're going to sit here and say, well, you have Miami down at what, 11, 12? I forget where I had them. And you still have Notre Dame at 5. I think if you were to put these teams on a neutral field after what we just saw on Saturday, I think the Notre Dame Fighting Irish would be favored over Miami. And I think it was just one of those perfect environments for Miami to get a really nice win. I'm not saying Miami's bad by doing that. Miami is also a top 12 team in the country. I just think in that situation, I would take the Fighting Irish as a favorite over Miami if they were on a neutral field in week 2. So that one is one I can understand you guys will be a little bit mad about. This one will probably be your most contentious one. My number 4 team in the nation, a team that is up 4 spots from where I had them in the preseason, it is the Ohio State Buckeyes. One of the 3 biggest risers from my preseason poll. I talked about how amazing the defense was on Monday's show. I don't know what more I need to say, how many times I could say Matt Patricia spanked me around a football field for 60 minutes. The defense was fantastic. The offense, you got to have patience with them. There's so much newness around. I am very curious to see how the run game develops with no Chip Kelly, with no Travion Henderson, with no Quinshon Judkins, because I do think run support is important for any quarterback, but also, first-year starters in Julian Sayin. I wonder at the end of the day if that imbalance on offense eventually holds them back from, repeating a national title or getting to be one of the Final Four teams in the nation. That being said, I did have to make a pretty substantial adjustment here for the Buckeyes, moving them up from 8 to 4 because the defense picked up right where it left off, despite a new coordinator and a lot of new pieces. Very impressed with how they performed on Saturday. The Ohio State Buckeyes, my number 4 team in the country. My number 3 team, and again, this is the part 2 to the part 1 of where you guys will find the most contention here. I still have the Texas Longhorns as my number 3 rated team in the country. I still have them 1 spot above the Ohio State Buckeyes. Just as I said with Notre Dame and Miami, I think if you pull this game out of Columbus, you say, okay, week 2, we're going to do a rematch. We're going to know everything we know from week 1. We're going to pull you out of Columbus. We'll put it in fucking, I don't know, Florida. Just put them on a neutral site. You're going to have Texas, Ohio State, another week of preparation. I believe that if you gave Sark and Arch a week to look at exactly what Matt Patricia did, they would have some sort of response. I think they would be favored in that game. I think they would win that game. It's that, hard to beat the same team twice. Getting another week of preparation, getting this game out of Columbus, getting the first game jitters out of Arch. If you disagree with me, fine, I get it. But you're also disagreeing with the Kelly Ford model, with the SP Plus model, the FPI. I also don't care if you disagree with me. This is the Springblake College Football Show. It's not commenter user 0895124 on TikTok channel. The Texas defense was awesome in week 1. Week 1. They looked fantastic. Front seven's terrific. They allowed one deep shot to Carnell Tate, but the defender was still in a decent position. It was just a better play by the wideout. They're very well coached. I think the offense needed to wake up a little bit in the second half. I think if you maybe started that game plan that you had in the second half and did it for 4 quarters, you might have a game that goes into overtime or at least puts up more points or more of an effort. I know that people can't wrap their minds around sometimes the difference between a ratings and a ranking system, but I think situationally everything played into Ohio State's hands there. And if you pulled it out, and again, I'm not saying Ohio State is bad. People are going to be like, you're talking shit about Ohio State. No, I have Ohio State as the 4th best team in the nation. I just think Texas is the 3rd best team. So, I don't know. I love getting mad about arguments I know I'm going to have tomorrow on TikTok or the day after on Twitter. Ohio State fans, man, they take this stuff so seriously. I got to say, whenever I put out Ohio State content, it gets the most love. I really appreciate you guys commenting and liking. But man, you guys are on top of your shit whenever someone says something you don't like. So hats off to you. Again, Ohio State 4, Texas 3, which leads me to number 2. This is mentally the biggest correction I made between the preseason and now. And I am just, with my life on the line, putting trust where trust is deserved and needed. And that is why I've got the Georgia Bulldogs as my number 2 team in the nation, up 4 spots from where they were in the preseason. I don't know what you want me to say, man. One, they played Marshall on Saturday. It wasn't like they had this top 10 matchup like some of these other teams did, but I liked what I saw out of Georgia. The things we needed to see fixed the most looked fixed. Zachariah Branch, the transfer edition at wide receiver, he was amazing. I finished with 3 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. His twin brother Zion led the team in tackles defensively. Gunnar Stockton was great, 200 through the air, 70 on the ground, 4 total touchdowns. Still need to see the run game figure itself out outside of Gunnar, but again, kind of like not in a Riley Leonard way, but you're going to get 30, 40 yards out of your quarterback in games like that. Man, I just have trust in Georgia right now more than I do every other team in the nation. And I think they should be, they were my pick to have the best record in the SEC. So this isn't like a crazy movement. I needed to see a few things from Georgia to start the season. I saw those things, and now I'm reevaluating and putting them as my number 2 team in the country. And that leaves us to number 1, which number 1 stays the same from where it was in the preseason. It is the Penn State Nittany Lions. They don't move at all. Aller was great. He threw 22 of 26, 217 yards and a touchdown. The motherfuckers did get backdoored at the end of the game, which pissed me off. They were covering against Nevada. Not for the entire part, but once they got to that comfy zone, you're like, all right, this is fine. And there was seconds left. Blew it. I think it was like 20 seconds or something left. Blew the back door. What I needed to see out of Penn State, I got. This was the other team. I was trying to remember who the other team was, where the running game is the strength, and you were like, what happened to the running game? The running backs, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, were fine, but like surprisingly not as dominant as you would have expected. But it didn't matter, because the thing that I needed to see the most out of Penn State, I saw. Kyron Hudson, Traber Pena combined for 13 catches, 163 yards, and a score. Both were terrific. And again, just shows you what what you needed to see out of Penn State. If I believe Penn State to be a team that will play for a national title and will win the Big Ten championship, I needed to see some talent on the perimeter. I think they have it, and I think that's something that is going to carry this team to a lot of great heights in 2025. So that rounds out the Week 2 Springblake Sweet 16. Again, 1 Penn State, 2 Georgia, 3 Texas, 4 Ohio State, 5 Notre Dame, 6 Oregon, 7 Florida, 8 LSU, 9 Alabama, 10 Clemson, 11 Texas A&M, 12 Oklahoma, 13 Miami, Michigan at 14, 15 Tennessee, and the USC Trojans as my number 16 rated team in the country.